The salvage crew found the wreck floating in the debris field of what used to be the Keltharian Defense Station. Commander Zrix approached the twisted hulk with professional disinterest, his scanner registering the vessel as a complete loss. The ship had been gutted, its hull torn open like paper, systems offline for what looked like months. According to the databanks, this was the merchant vessel Steady Profit, registered to a small trading consortium that had gone bankrupt 3 cycles ago. What caught his attention was the distress beacon, still weakly pulsing from somewhere deep in the wreckage. Zrix sent 2 of his crew across the void to investigate, watching through their helmet cameras as they navigated the twisted corridors. The ship was in terrible condition. Everything valuable had been stripped away by previous salvage operations. The power core was missing entirely, replaced by a jury-rigged emergency cell that barely produced enough energy to keep life support running in one tiny compartment. That was where they found the human. He was sitting in what used to be a storage closet, surrounded by empty ration packs, and wearing a makeshift environmental suit cobbled together from spare parts. When the salvage team burst through the door, the human looked up with eyes that were startlingly alert. Despite his obvious malnourishment, he raised his hands slowly, speaking in heavily accented Galactic Common. "Thank the stars. I was beginning to think nobody would come." Zrix brought the human back to his ship and immediately regretted it. The creature would not stop talking. His name was Marcus Chen, and he had been part of the Steady Profit's skeleton crew when pirates attacked. The rest of the crew had escaped in the life pods, but Marcus had been in the cargo bay during the attack and got sealed in when the hull breached. By the time he managed to reach the bridge, everyone was gone. "So I've been living here for 4 months," Marcus explained cheerfully, as if this was the most normal thing in the galaxy. "The ship's a complete mess, obviously, but she kept me alive. That's more than most would say about the Steady Profit even when she was operational." Zrix studied the human with growing fascination. The Steady Profit had been a notoriously terrible vessel even before its destruction. It was a Velnari construction. Bottom-tier quality. The kind of ship that trading companies bought when they couldn't afford anything better. Its systems failed constantly, its hull plating was substandard, and its engines were so inefficient that most pilots considered it a miracle the thing could achieve faster than light travel at all. "You survived 4 months on that wreck?" Zrix asked. "How?" "There's no power. No functioning life support. No food stores." Marcus grinned, and Zrix noticed the human's teeth were surprisingly well maintained despite his ordeal. "I improvised. The emergency power cell still had some juice, so I rigged it to cycle life support to just 1 room. Food was trickier, but the hydroponics bay was mostly intact. I got some of the plants growing again using spare parts from the medical bay. Water came from the ice deposits on the hull exterior. I just had to go outside and chip some off every few days." The salvage commander stared at him. "You went outside. Into hard vacuum." Repeatedly. "Well, yeah. I made a suit from cargo liners and emergency sealant. It wasn't comfortable, but it worked well enough for short trips." Zrix exchanged looks with his crew. Humans were known in the wider galaxy, but they were rare this far out in the Keltharian sectors. Most species knew them as tenacious survivors with a disturbing tolerance for discomfort. But hearing about it and seeing it were different things entirely. They brought Marcus back to the nearest station, a mining outpost called Viridian's Rest. The human thanked them profusely and immediately started asking questions about employment opportunities. Within a week, he had talked his way into a job with one of the mining operations. Zrix forgot about him soon after. 3 standard months later, Zrix received an unexpected message. Marcus Chen was requesting his presence at a shipyard on the edge of the system. Curious, despite himself, Zrix made the journey. The shipyard was a modest operation, the kind of place where old vessels went to be broken down for parts or cheaply refitted. Marcus was waiting at the docking bay, looking healthier than he had during their first meeting. He had gained weight, and his eyes had that particular gleam that Zrix associated with people who had recently discovered something exciting. "Commander Zrix, thank you for coming. I wanted you to see this." Marcus led him through the shipyard to a private dock. Floating there, held in place by docking clamps, was the wreck of the Steady Profit. Except it wasn't a wreck anymore. The hull had been patched, though the repairs were rough and clearly done on a tight budget. New plating covered the worst of the damage, welded in place with what looked like material salvaged from other vessels. "You bought the wreck?" Zrix asked, incredulous. "I did. Used all my savings from the mining job, plus took out a loan that will probably keep me in debt for the next decade. But look at her, Commander. She's got good bones." Zrix looked at the ship. It absolutely did not have good bones. The Steady Prophet had never had good bones. It was built badly from the start, then damaged extensively, then abandoned. No reasonable person would invest money in trying to restore it. "Marcus," Zrix said carefully, "I appreciate your optimism, but this vessel is not worth restoring. The cost of repairs alone would exceed the price of buying a functional ship of similar class." The human's grin never wavered. "That's what everyone keeps telling me. But here's the thing, Commander. This ship kept me alive when she had no right to, and I figure if she can do that with literally nothing, imagine what she could do with a little love and attention." Over the following weeks, Zrix found himself drawn back to the shipyard repeatedly. He told himself it was professional curiosity. In truth, he was fascinated by the humans' project. Marcus had hired a small crew of fellow humans and a few adventurous aliens who were willing to work for cheap. Together, they were transforming the Steady Prophet from a wreck into something resembling a functional vessel. The work was unconventional, to put it mildly. Humans, Zrix learned, had a very different approach to engineering than most species. Where Velnari designers insisted on following established protocols and using certified components, Marcus and his team improvised constantly. They salvaged parts from dozens of different ship classes, modified them to work together, and installed them without regard for manufacturer recommendations. The power core came from a scrapped mining vessel, oversized for the Steady Prophet's frame but capable of producing nearly triple the energy output of the original. The engine assembly was pieced together from 3 different models, synchronized through a custom computer system that Marcus built himself. The weapon systems were perhaps the most bizarre element. The Steady Prophet had never been armed beyond a basic defensive screen, but Marcus installed a pair of railguns salvaged from a military surplus auction, mounted on swivels that allowed for surprising range of motion. "Humans have a saying," Marcus explained one day while they watched his crew install the new sensor array. "Any tool can be a weapon if you hold it right." The Steady Prophet was built as a cheap cargo hauler, and she was terrible at that job. But maybe she was meant to be something else. Zrix watched a human engineer crawl into a maintenance shaft that was clearly too small for most species, carrying tools and replacement wiring. "What do you intend to do with her once she's operational?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Honest answer? I'm not entirely sure yet. Part of me wants to go back to trading. Prove that this ship can do the job she was built for. But I've also been thinking about all the other wrecks out there, all the other crews that might get stranded like I was. Maybe the Steady Prophet could be useful for rescue operations." "Rescue work doesn't pay well," Zrix pointed out. "No," Marcus agreed. "But it matters." The restoration took 6 months total. When Marcus finally powered up the rebuilt ship for the first time, half the shipyard came out to watch. There was a general expectation of catastrophic failure. Mixing components from different manufacturers was risky enough, but the Steady Prophet's base frame was still compromised in dozens of places. Even with the patches and reinforcements, most engineers predicted the ship would tear itself apart the moment it tried to engage its faster-than-light drive. The engines hummed to life. Power flowed through the rebuilt systems. The ship's computer, a custom job programmed by Marcus himself, ran diagnostics and reported all systems functional. Marcus sat in the captain's chair, surrounded by his small crew, and initiated the launch sequence. The Steady Prophet lifted off from the shipyard cradle without incident. It maneuvered through the station traffic with surprising grace for such an ungainly vessel. And when Marcus engaged the faster-than-light drive, the ship didn't explode or shake apart or do any of the things the observers expected. Instead, it simply vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind only a brief shimmer of exotic particles. Zrix received a message 3 days later. Marcus had completed a circuit of the system, pushing the Steady Prophet through a series of increasingly demanding maneuvers. The ship had performed beyond all expectations. It was fast, surprisingly so, and the oversized power core gave it capabilities well beyond its weight class. The railguns had tested perfectly. The custom sensor suite could detect objects at ranges that would make military scouts envious. "She's not pretty," Marcus's message concluded, "but she's ours, and she's ready for whatever comes next." What came next arrived sooner than anyone anticipated. The distress call originated from a passenger liner in the Keltharian frontier territories. The vessel had suffered a catastrophic drive failure and was stranded in a dangerous region of space known for pirate activity. Multiple ships had received the distress signal, but none were willing to risk the journey. The pirates operating in that sector were well armed and aggressive, and the passenger liner was too large to defend itself effectively once its shields failed. Marcus heard the distress call like everyone else. Unlike everyone else, he immediately set course for the stranded ship. Zrix, who had been monitoring Marcus's activities with continuing interest, sent a urgent message. "Marcus, you cannot seriously be considering responding to that call. The Kashari marauders control that territory. They have warships, proper military vessels. The Steady Prophet is barely operational. You will be destroyed." The reply came back almost immediately. "Maybe. But there are 3,000 people on that liner, Commander. Someone has to try." The Steady Prophet jumped into hyperspace, heading toward a region of space that every sensible captain avoided. Zrix sat at his station, staring at his screens, and wondered if he would ever hear from the strange human again. Based on probability and common sense, the answer was almost certainly no. He was wrong. The Kashari marauders detected the Steady Prophet the moment it dropped out of hyperspace. Captain Vrax, commanding the marauder flagship Crimson Talon, studied the sensor readings with mild amusement. A single ship, barely destroyer class by the readings, approaching their blockade of the stranded passenger liner. It was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. "Open a channel," Vrax ordered. "Let's see who we're dealing with." The communication came through immediately. The face on the screen was human, youngish by their standards, with dark hair and eyes that showed no fear whatsoever. Vrax had dealt with humans before. They were unpredictable, which made them either very profitable or very dangerous, sometimes both. "This is Marcus Chen, captain of the Steady Prophet. I'm here to provide assistance to the stranded liner. I'd appreciate it if you'd let me through. The sea time. I'm on long it is. Quote. Vrax laughed, a harsh sound that translated well across the communication system. "You appreciate it? Human, you've entered a restricted zone. The liner is already ours. We're negotiating a reasonable ransom with the passengers. This doesn't concern you. Those people need help now, not after you've spent days haggling over prices. I'm going through. You can let me pass peacefully, or we can do this the hard way." The audacity was staggering. Vrax glanced at his weapons officer, who confirmed that the Steady Prophet was armed, but only barely. 2 railguns, decent shields, nothing that could threaten a proper warship. The Crimson Talon alone could destroy the vessel in seconds, and Vrax had 3 other ships in his fleet. "The hard way then," Vrax said, and closed the channel. "Tactical. Disable their engines. I want to capture that ship intact. Anyone crazy enough to approach us like this might be worth interrogating." The Crimson Talon opened fire with precision weapons designed to cripple rather than destroy. The first volley should have taken out the Steady Prophet's engine assembly cleanly. Instead, the smaller ship twisted away with shocking speed, evading the shots entirely. The second volley met the same fate. "What's their acceleration curve?" Vrax demanded. "Reading 0.75 standard, Captain." That shouldn't be possible for a ship that size and configuration." Vrax frowned. The Steady Prophet was accelerating like a much lighter vessel, darting around the Crimson Talon's fire with precision that suggested either an extremely skilled pilot or computer-assisted maneuvering well beyond standard capabilities. Probably both. "All ships, weapons free. Bring it down." 4 warships opened fire simultaneously. The Steady Prophet should have been vaporized instantly. Instead, it dove toward the Crimson Talon, using the larger ship's mass as partial cover from the other vessels. The railguns on its hull opened fire, and Vrax felt the impacts through his deck plating. Shields holding at 86%, his engineer reported. Minor damage to forward sections. Captain, their weapons are significantly more powerful than initial scans suggested. The Steady Prophet was already moving again, executing a roll that brought it around the Crimson Talon's flank. More railgun fire, precisely targeted at the warship's sensor arrays. 2 of them went dark before the shields could compensate. Vrax was no longer amused. All ships, pattern formation. Box it in. I want that vessel destroyed. The Kashari warships moved to surround the Steady Prophet, cutting off its escape routes. It was a standard anti-fighter tactic, designed to overwhelm a single target with fire from multiple angles simultaneously. No ship could dodge in all directions at once. Marcus proved him wrong. The Steady Prophet's sensors had been tracking all 4 warships continuously. As they moved into formation, Marcus triggered a sequence he had programmed into the ship's computer weeks ago. The Steady Prophet went dark for exactly 2 seconds, all emissions ceasing, making it invisible to the warship's active sensors. In those 2 seconds, the ship rotated 90 degrees and fired maneuvering thrusters at maximum burn. When the Keshari ships fired their coordinated volley, the Steady Prophet was no longer where they expected. The shots missed by precious meters, and in the confusion, Marcus brought his ship about and accelerated directly toward the gap in their formation. He's heading for the liner, Vrax's tactical officer reported unnecessarily. Then stop him. But the Steady Prophet was already past them, its oversized engine pushing it to speeds that the heavier warships couldn't match at close range. Marcus reached the stranded passenger liner and immediately began broadcasting on all channels. Liner Celestial Dream, this is the Steady Prophet. I'm here to provide emergency assistance. What's your status? The response came from a Velnari captain who sounded utterly baffled. Steady Prophet. We have complete drive failure and shields at minimal power. We cannot evacuate, and we cannot defend ourselves. You should leave immediately before those warships destroy you. Not leaving without you. Sending over engineering specifications for an emergency power transfer. If I can get your shields back online. Can you make a jump to hyperspace? Perhaps, but the pirates will never allow us enough time. Marcus grinned, though no one could see it. Let me worry about the pirates. Just get your people ready to jump the moment I give you the word. He swung the Steady Prophet around to face the approaching warships. 4 vessels, each one larger and more heavily armed than his ship. Every tactical manual in existence said this was an unwinnable fight. Marcus had never been very good at following manuals. The Crimson Talon opened fire again, and this time Vrax aimed to kill. The Steady Prophet's shields flared under the impact, buckling but holding. Marcus returned fire, his railguns targeting not the warship's hull but the exposed weapons ports. It was incredibly difficult shooting, requiring precision that most gunners couldn't achieve even with computer assistance. One of the Crimson Talon's forward plasma cannons went offline, destroyed by a railgun slug that threaded through its shields at the exact moment of cycling. Then another. Marcus was systematically dismantling the warship's offensive capabilities. One weapon at a time, Vrax stared at his tactical display in disbelief. How is he doing that? Unknown, Captain. His targeting systems are operating beyond manufacturer specifications, possibly human modifications. The other 3 warships were closing in now, trying to bracket the Steady Prophet between them. Marcus saw them coming and made a decision that most captains would consider insane. He aimed his ship directly at the Crimson Talon and accelerated. He's going to ram us, Vrax's pilot reported, voice rising. Evasive maneuvers. But Marcus had no intention of ramming. At the last possible moment, he cut his main engines and fired maneuvering thrusters, sliding the Steady Prophet alongside the Crimson Talon's hull at a distance of less than 50 meters. At that range, the warship's own shields prevented the other Kashari vessels from firing without hitting their flagship, and Marcus used those precious seconds to complete the power transfer to the Celestial Dream. Liner, your shields are coming back online. Start your jump calculations now. The passenger liner's drives began to hum with returning power. The celestial dream was old and slow, but its captain was competent. Jump calculations that should have taken 5 minutes were completed in 3. The massive ship began to shimmer as it prepared to enter hyperspace. Vrax realized what was happening and screamed orders at his weapons officers. "Forget the small ship. Target the liner. Stop them from jumping." The Kashari warships opened fire on the celestial dream, but its shields were back at full power now, fed by the Steady Prophet's oversized reactor. The plasma fire splashed harmlessly against the barrier, and then the liner was gone, vanished into hyperspace with 3,000 grateful passengers aboard. Marcus found himself alone in hostile space, surrounded by 4 very angry pirate warships. "Well," he muttered to his crew, "this is going to be interesting." The Crimson Talon's weapons officer finally got a clear shot. Plasma cannons fired at point-blank range, slamming into the Steady Prophet's port shields. The barrier collapsed entirely, and the ship's hull plating began to blacken under the heat. Warning alarms shrieked through the bridge. Marcus's engineer shouted damage reports, but he was already moving, rolling the ship to present fresh shields to the incoming fire. The Steady Prophet had one advantage that was becoming increasingly apparent. It was small, quick, and built by someone who understood that survival sometimes mattered more than firepower. "Routing all power to engines," Marcus announced. "We're leaving. They'll follow us," his pilot pointed out. "Only if they can catch us." The Steady Prophet's engine flared white-hot as Marcus diverted every spare bit of power into thrust. The ship leaped forward, accelerating away from the Kashari warships at a rate that should have torn apart its structural frame. But Marcus had reinforced that frame personally, adding braces and supports in places the original designers never intended. The ship groaned and shuddered, but it held together. Behind them, the Keshari warships gave chase, but they were heavier, built for sustained combat rather than speed. The gap between them and the Steady Prophet began to widen. Vrax watched the smaller ship pull away with grudging respect. "Get me a sensor lock. I want to track where they jump." But when the Steady Prophet finally engaged its hyperspace drive, Marcus had one more trick ready. He jumped to a seemingly random coordinate, then immediately jumped again, then a third time in quick succession. It was dangerous, potentially catastrophic for the ship's drive systems, but it made tracking impossible. By the time the Kashari warships reached the first jump point, the Steady Prophet had vanished completely. Marcus brought his ship back to Viridian's rest station 3 days later. The Steady Prophet looked terrible, its hull scorched and battered, systems running on emergency power, but it was intact, and more importantly, so was its crew. Commander Zrix was waiting at the docking bay when Marcus emerged. The human looked exhausted, sporting a burn on one arm and moving with the stiffness of someone who had spent too long in a combat situation, but he was grinning. "Told you she had good bones," Marcus said. Zrix stared at him. "You engaged 4 warships, alone, with a rebuilt cargo hauler, and I got those passengers to safety. That's what matters." Word of the incident spread quickly through the sector. Within weeks, everyone knew the story of the human captain who had defied the Kashari marauders in a ship that shouldn't have been able to fly at all. The story grew in the telling, as stories do, but the core facts remained unchanged. The Steady Prophet had accomplished something that no reasonable person would have thought possible. Marcus received offers after that. Trading consortiums wanted to hire him. Security companies offered lucrative contracts. One military procurement officer even suggested he sell the Steady Prophet to the fleet for study. He turned them all down. "The ship and I have an understanding," he explained to Zrix over drinks at the station's cantina. "She keeps me alive, and I make sure she gets to do something meaningful. Hauling cargo for profit just doesn't interest me anymore." "So what will you do?" Marcus looked out the viewport at his ship, floating in its docking cradle, surrounded by repair crews making good the damage from the fight. "Keep helping people who need it. There are a lot of stranded ships out there. A lot of crews in trouble. Someone should be looking out for them." Zrix raised his glass. "To the Steady Prophet, then." They drank to that, and neither of them knew that the ship's reputation was only beginning to grow. The message reached Marcus 6 months after the incident with the Kashari marauders. It came through official channels, marked with the seal of the Galactic Coalition Council, which was unusual enough to catch his attention immediately. The coalition rarely concerned itself with individual captains, especially those operating on the frontier. Marcus opened the message in his cabin aboard the Steady Prophet. The ship was currently docked at a repair station, undergoing maintenance after a rescue operation that had taken them through an asteroid field. The engines needed recalibration, and several hull plates required replacement. But that was normal. The Steady Prophet was always in need of some kind of repair. The message was from Admiral Keseth, a Velnari officer who commanded the Coalition's anti-piracy task force in the sector. Marcus had never met the Admiral, but he knew the name. Keseth was famous for her methodical approach to warfare and her absolute intolerance for disorder in her jurisdiction. Captain Chen, your actions regarding the Celestial Dream incident have come to my attention. I would like to discuss a matter of mutual interest. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience. Marcus showed the message to his crew during their morning briefing. They had become close over the past months. A collection of misfits who had found purpose aboard the strange rebuilt ship. There was Sarah Kim, his pilot, a former racing competitor who had been banned from professional circuits for improvising maneuvers that judges deemed too dangerous. His engineer was a Throck named Grumish, who had worked in shipyards for 30 years before deciding he wanted to see what ships could actually do outside of controlled environments. The weapons officer was a young Keltharian named Vess, who had joined them after watching the Steady Prophet outmaneuver warships that should have destroyed it easily. Think it's trouble? Sarah asked, leaning back in her chair. Could be. Could also be opportunity. Marcus studied the message again. Only one way to find out. He made the call that afternoon. Admiral Keseth appeared on his screen exactly on time, her features composed and professional. She studied Marcus for a long moment before speaking. Captain Chen, thank you for responding. I have a proposition for you. I'm listening. The Coalition has been attempting to combat piracy in this sector for 5 years with limited success. The Keshari Marauders, the group you encountered, are only one of several organized criminal enterprises operating in the region. They target merchant vessels, demand ransoms, and generally make legitimate trade extremely difficult. Marcus nodded. He had heard all this before. Everyone in the sector knew about the pirate problem. Standard Coalition response protocol involves deploying patrol ships to protect trade routes, Keseth continued. However, this approach has proven ineffective. The pirates simply avoid patrolled areas and strike elsewhere. We need a different strategy. And you think I can help with that? I think your ship can help with that. The Steady Prophet is small, fast, and appears entirely non-threatening. You've also demonstrated an ability to survive encounters that would destroy most vessels. These qualities make you ideal for a specific type of mission. You want me to hunt pirates? Keseth's expression didn't change, but Marcus thought he detected a hint of approval. I want you to be bait. Draw them out, engage them, and provide targeting data for Coalition ships waiting nearby. You would be well compensated, and we would provide support for repairs and upgrades. Marcus considered this. The offer was interesting, but it came with obvious risks. What happens when the pirates realize what we're doing and decide to just destroy us outright? That is certainly a risk. However, I've reviewed the tactical data from your encounter with the Kashari fleet. Your ship's survival was not simply luck. You've modified it extensively, in ways that give you significant advantages in combat situations. I believe those advantages would allow you to survive long enough for Coalition forces to respond. You've studied my ship? I've studied everything about you, Captain Chen. Your background, your crew, your modifications to the Steady Prophet. I make it my business to understand assets before I deploy them. Keseth leaned forward slightly. I'm not asking you to sacrifice yourself. I'm offering you a chance to turn your rescue operations into something more systematic. Help me clean up this sector, and you'll save far more lives than you could through individual interventions. She was right. And Marcus knew it. He had responded to dozens of distress calls in recent months. But for every ship he helped, 3 more were being attacked. The pirate problem was getting worse, not better. If he could help change that, even at personal risk. Wasn't that worth doing? I'll need to discuss this with my crew, he said. This isn't the kind of decision I can make alone. Of course. Contact me within 48 hours with your answer. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Marcus laid out the Admiral's proposal completely, including all the risks. Then he asked for everyone's honest opinion. Grumish spoke first. The ship can handle combat. We've proven that. But repeated engagements will cause wear that might exceed our repair capacity. If we take this contract, we'll need regular maintenance support. The Admiral offered that, Marcus noted. Sarah drummed her fingers on the table. I'm more worried about escalation. Right now, pirates see us as an annoying obstacle. If we start actively hunting them, they'll make us a priority target. We'll have entire fleets coming after us. Which is exactly what the Admiral wants, Vess pointed out. Draw them out. Let the coalition forces destroy them. It's sound strategy. Assuming we can survive long enough for the plan to work. They debated for another hour, weighing risks against potential benefits. Finally, Marcus called for a vote. It was unanimous. They would accept Kesseth's offer. The first operation launched 2 weeks later. The plan was straightforward. The Steady Prophet would travel through a known pirate hunting ground while broadcasting as a standard merchant vessel. When pirates attacked, coalition destroyers waiting in nearby systems would jump in and engage. Marcus took the Steady Prophet into the target zone, a stretch of space near the Helion trade route, where 6 ships had been attacked in the past month. He set the ship to broadcast standard merchant identifiers and reduce speed to match typical cargo hauler specifications. Feels weird, pretending to be defenseless, Sarah commented from the pilot station. We're not defenseless, we're just not advertising. Marcus checked the sensor displays. The coalition ships were holding position 3 light minutes away, close enough to respond quickly but far enough to avoid detection. How long do you think before someone takes the bait? The answer was 4 hours. A scanner contact appeared at the edge of sensor range, approaching at high speed. Marcus recognized the configuration immediately. It was a Kashari vessel, smaller than the warships he had faced before, probably a raider designed for quick strikes against undefended targets. Contact on approach vector, Vess reported. Single ship. Armed with plasma cannons and missile pods. They're hailing us. Put them through. The pirate captain was Keshari, but not one Marcus recognized. Young, probably ambitious, looking to make a reputation. Merchant vessel, cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. This doesn't have to be violent. Marcus let tension show in his voice. Please, we're just carrying agricultural supplies. We don't have anything valuable. We'll be the judges of that. Cut your engines now, or we open fire. Marcus glanced at Sarah, who had her hand on the engine controls. Do it. Make it look convincing. The Steady Prophet's engines powered down, and the ship began to drift. The pirate vessel approached. Weapons hot, but not firing. They were confident. Expecting no resistance from a standard merchant ship, coalition forces, this is Steady Prophet. We have positive contact. Begin your approach. 3 light minutes away, coalition destroyers engaged their faster-than-light drives. They would arrive in approximately 90 seconds. Marcus just had to keep the pirates interested until then. The Kashari ship moved alongside, extending docking clamps. Marcus waited until they were fully committed to the boarding maneuver, then fired maneuvering thrusters, pulling the Steady Prophet away. At the same moment, his shields came online at full power. The pirate captain's expression changed from confidence to confusion to anger in rapid succession. What? You're not a merchant vessel. Not exactly. No. Marcus brought his railguns to bear. You've got about 60 seconds to surrender before things get messy. The Kashari ship broke off, accelerating away. But they had wasted precious time with the boarding attempt. And now coalition destroyers were dropping out of hyperspace all around them. The pirate vessel tried to run, but 3 coalition ships blocked every escape route. The battle lasted less than 5 minutes. Outgunned and surrounded, the pirates surrendered. Marcus watched the coalition forces take the pirate crew into custody and felt satisfaction. This had worked exactly as planned. One pirate ship captured, no casualties on either side. It continued like that for the next 3 months. The steady prophet would enter dangerous territory, pretending to be an easy target. Pirates would approach, and coalition forces would arrive to capture them. Ship after ship was taken out of operation. The pirate organizations began to realize something was happening, but they couldn't identify the source of the problem. Then the Kashari marauders figured it out. Vrax, the captain who had fought Marcus months earlier, had been tracking coalition movements carefully. He noticed that every successful anti-piracy operation coincided with reports of a small merchant vessel in the area. It took time to gather enough data, but eventually, the pattern became clear. They're using bait, Vrax told his assembled captains. One ship, probably fast and well-armed, is drawing us out for coalition ambushes. We need to identify this vessel and destroy it. Finding the steady prophet proved surprisingly easy once they knew what to look for. Marcus had been operating in the same general region for months, and his ship's profile was distinctive if you knew what to watch for. Vrax collected every sensor scan of merchant vessels that had been in the area during coalition operations and compared them. One ship appeared in every single incident. There, Vrax said, highlighting the data. That's our target. Next time it enters our territory, we don't approach with one ship. We send everything we have. The trap was set 2 weeks later. Marcus brought the steady prophet into a region near the Cordova system, broadcasting standard merchant identifiers. Coalition forces were in position, waiting for the expected pirate response. What arrived was not what anyone expected. 12 ships dropped out of hyperspace simultaneously, surrounding the steady prophet in a perfect sphere. Kashari warships, all of them broadcasting active weapon locks. Vrax's face appeared on every communication channel. Hello again, human. I've been looking forward to this. Marcus's blood went cold. 12 ships. The coalition response team consisted of only 3 destroyers, and they were still minutes away. This was an overwhelming force, and there was no way to fight through it. Captain, Sarah said quietly, we need to run. Now. He's right, Grumish added. The ship can't handle this many opponents. Marcus studied the tactical display, calculating angles and distances. Vrax had positioned his ships carefully, blocking every obvious escape route, but there was something off about the formation. The ships were too evenly spaced, too perfect. Vrax was so confident in his trap that he hadn't accounted for unconventional responses. All power to forward shields, Marcus ordered. Sarah, plot a course directly through their formation. We're going to punch through. That's suicide, Vess protested. Maybe. But it's better than sitting here waiting to die. Grumish, I need everything the reactor can give me. Burn out the safety limiters if you have to. The engineer hesitated, then nodded. Understood, Captain. Marcus selected a target, a gap between 2 warships that looked slightly larger than the others. All hands, brace for impact. This is going to be rough. He engaged the engines at full power. The steady prophet leaped forward, accelerating directly toward the Kashari formation. The warships opened fire immediately, plasma cannons and missiles converging on the small ship from all directions. The forward shields lit up like a star as they absorbed the incoming fire. Power readings spiked into the red, as Grumish diverted every spare bit of energy to maintaining the barrier. The ship shook violently, alarms screaming, but the shields held. Marcus aimed for the gap between warships, threading the needle at speeds that would have destroyed a normal vessel. One of the Kashari ships tried to adjust position to block him, but the maneuver was too slow. The steady prophet shot through the gap with meters to spare, emerging on the other side of the formation before the pirates could react. Now! Marcus shouted. Sarah engaged the faster-than-light drive without bothering with standard jump calculations. It was dangerous, potentially catastrophic, but they needed distance immediately. The ship lurched as reality bent around it, and then they were in hyperspace, leaving the Kashari fleet behind. They dropped out 30 light-years away, in an empty region of space, far from any established routes. The Steady Prophet's systems were damaged extensively, the shields were offline, the hull was scorched in dozens of places, and the faster-than-light drive was making alarming sounds that suggested imminent failure. But they were alive. Marcus sent an emergency message to Admiral Kesseth, explaining what had happened. Her response came quickly, directing them to a coalition repair facility where they could recover safely. The repairs took 6 weeks. During that time, Marcus received visits from multiple coalition officers, all wanting to know exactly how he had escaped an ambush that should have been lethal. He explained his reasoning, the gamble he had taken, the modifications to his ship that made the maneuver possible. Admiral Kesseth came personally for the final debriefing. She studied the damage reports, the tactical logs, everything that had happened during the encounter. Then she looked at Marcus with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You should have died," she said bluntly. "According to every tactical model we have, that ambush was perfect. No ship of your class should have been able to escape. The Steady Prophet isn't like other ships." "No, it certainly isn't." Kesseth paused. "The pirate organizations now know what we're doing. The bait strategy won't work anymore. However, I have another proposal." Marcus waited. "Your ship has proven itself in combat repeatedly. What if, instead of pretending to be a merchant vessel, you operated openly as a coalition auxiliary? We would provide full support, better weapons, enhanced systems. In exchange, you would actively patrol trade routes and engage pirates when you find them." It was a significant commitment, far beyond what Marcus had originally agreed to. But he thought about all the ships he had saved, all the lives that had been protected because the Steady Prophet was there when needed. This would be a chance to do more, to make a real difference in the sector. He looked at his crew, saw their expressions. They had already made their decision. "We accept," Marcus said. Admiral Kesseth smiled, the first time Marcus had seen such an expression on her face. "Welcome to the Coalition Fleet, Captain Chen. I think you're going to fit in quite well." The Steady Prophet underwent extensive upgrades over the following months. Coalition engineers studied Marcus's modifications. Learning from the humans' unconventional approach to ship design, they added better weapons, more advanced sensors, improved shield generators. But they kept the core modifications intact, the custom systems that made the ship unique. When the work was finished, the Steady Prophet looked like a strange hybrid, part military vessel and part improvised experiment. It was still ugly, still cobbled together from mismatched parts, but now it flew under coalition colors, and its reputation had spread throughout the sector. Pirates began to fear the appearance of the strange little ship. Merchant captains would breathe easier when they heard the Steady Prophet was patrolling their route. The vessel that everyone had written off as worthless, that had been abandoned in a debris field and left to drift, had become one of the most effective anti-piracy assets in the entire region. Marcus stood on the bridge one day, watching stars drift past the viewport, and thought about the journey that had brought him here. From stranded and starving in a wreck, to captain of a ship that regularly accomplished the impossible. It had been a strange path, full of risks and dangers, but he wouldn't change any of it. "Captain, we're receiving a distress signal," Vess reported. "Merchant convoy under attack, 3 systems away." Marcus smiled. This was what the Steady Prophet was built for, what it had always been meant to do. Not hauling cargo for profit, but being there when people needed help most. "Set course," he ordered. "Maximum speed. Let's show these pirates why they should have stayed home today." The Steady Prophet's engines flared bright, and the ship leaped forward into the darkness, ready for whatever came next. It was a terrible ship that had been turned into something remarkable. Not through expensive upgrades or perfect engineering, but through determination, creativity, and the stubborn refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. And across the sector, when people heard that the Steady Prophet was coming, they knew that help was on the way.